Oh, hi, everybody. My name is Matt Storrs, and welcome to Mattsplaining. On today's episode, I have an expert on who I'm very excited to speak with. Expert, please introduce yourself and tell us what you're an expert in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt, for having me. My name is Matt Micheletti. I'm a Phoenix-based improviser and stand-up comedian. My expertise is in the field of weather and weather forecasting. I was a weather forecaster in the United States Air Force from 2002 to 2005, doing land-based forecasts, as well as working for the Western Area Defense Sector as a scramble pilot forecaster. In addition to that, I also taught backcountry weather forecasting to backcountry groups in northern New Mexico. So that's my area of expertise.
Absolutely fantastic. I have known quite a bit of weather and weather-related forecasting, and known quite a bit about it since when I was a child. And I think the time that I got most interested in it was when I think the time that I got most interested in it was in just before you actually started your job in around 1998. I believe there was real big international problem with a person by the name of Sir August de Winter.
Mhm.
And what he did, as my understanding, I was a child at the time, was he was able to figure out how to control the weather and he held the world hostage. And so by doing that, and ultimately he was stopped by some secret agents over there in the UK. And what the thing is, for years and years and years, people were like all these mysteries of like who controls the weather, who controls this, that, the other thing. Like, do we sacrifice virgins to gods to get more rain? I mean, actually, that isn't necessarily virgin sacrifice is somewhat viable in some places for certain tropical things. But since we have Mr. De Winter's devices since 1998, 1999, around the UK, we have been able to control the weather. And so we have basically throughout the world been incrementally increasing the temperatures, mostly to help with the sales of air conditioning technology because there's been a lot of advancements in the last couple of years. There's whole air conditioning units, things that used to be 5,000 pounds, big things you had to have something outside and then like it goes through your house. And they're just these real small units you put in windows and stuff like that. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
stuff like they air condition just the vestibules. And then you also have it where every country, it's ultimately being controlled by satellites. And so some countries, they go a little haywire. And now most of the wars and like scuffles between countries are fought with the satellites. So the United States might make it a little bit hotter in, like, let's say, Venezuela, to
Mhm.
help facilitate some civil unrest there. And vice versa, China might be making it a little bit hotter in the Southwest or making it so that there are some hotter days in New York City. So there are more opportunities for flowers to propagate. So then we have a lot more days of pollen coming out from our trees. And a lot of people, I don't know if you prescribe to this, but a lot of people think that because our satellite tech weather control technology is getting so good in not only predicting it, but also creating the weather, that eventually, sometime in the future, we're going to have to rely on a Scottish man and he's going to have to like save us from what was quote unquote called a geostorm, where these satellites are going to go haywire, creating unbelievably violent storms all across the world that we, unbeknownst to us, have created because we've tried to play God, so to speak, and
Mhm.
we've gotten away from the old ways of just doing a simple virgin sacrifice. And if we get that up, we wouldn't necessarily be as efficient and wouldn't be as consistent, but I think that we would be able to much better respect the weather as opposed to creating a situation where we're going to put the whole world into the hands of this Scottish man who is really good at saving us, but it's going to be a challenge for him, and there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. It's going to be make for a very interesting documentary when it's ultimately made. But I think that it's a testament to human culture and human ingenuity that we're even trying to,
Hmm.
harness the weather, trying to understand the weather. And I think that that's one of the most amazing things that humans have been capable of doing is, trying to find ways to help one another just by trying to understand something that is so often overlooked every day. The simplest way of like, oh, I've forgotten. It doesn't look like it's going to rain in the morning, and then by the afternoon, there's a huge storm rolling in, and it's like, oh, I
Always
would
happens. Yeah.
always happens, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
if only I had my umbrella with me, I would be fine. But it's like you never know. But like by being able to predict that and listen to people, I think that that's a truly beautiful thing. Now, Matt,
Yeah,
based,
I had a question for you real
yeah, yeah,
quick.
yeah.
The Scottish gentleman, what's his background like? It sounds like he's almost some kind of weather miracle worker. Did he acquire these over time? Is he somehow genetically predisposed to being able to alter the weather? What's his story?
Yeah, so what is his background is actually quite fascinating, if I could be honest with you. He's found himself in a lot of circumstances where he's been put in life or death sort of situations where he's had to
Mm-hmm.
resolve conflict. So famously, he was in a position where there are about 299 other fellows, and he was trying to stop an invasion. Similarly, there's a couple times when he tried to save the president of the United States.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
he saved his family by taking him to Greenland at one point. He was an airplane pilot. A lot of people don't know this. And he had to save the people on his plane. And then also, this is a thing that there's complexities to everybody. There's a lot of instances where he has been looking for love and trying to like facilitate love. So that
Ah,
is just amazing, amazing things that he's tried to do. Has been a
I,
bounty
yeah.
hunter. He's hunted Dracula, these sorts of things. And yeah, so Matt, based on what you've heard so far, about how much of that would you say is accurate?
Given my background, if one would be a like a really cloudy, rainy day, and 10 being absolutely correct, a sunshiny day, I would say that your described outlook there, your story would be something like fair to partly cloudy. I would say about 30% true. 30% true.
Okay, so like a day where you're definitely going to want to put on sunscreen before you go
Yeah,
out because you might get a little bit more UV rays than you're expecting.
absolutely. And that would be because this Scottish gentleman just not did not have his act together. He did not. Maybe he was out drinking the whiskey a little late the night
Hmm.
before and just a little hungover, just not doing his job. But yeah, I would say about 30% correct on what you're talking about.
Fantastic, fantastic. Yeah, tell me about your experience. What drew you to the weather?
Well, I've always been an outdoors person. I went camping a lot as a kid. So the natural introduction to weather for me was first with astronomy and learning about how tides are created with our interaction and gravity with the moon and things like the Coriolis force and the various physical forces that control our weather patterns here on Earth. And the thing that really fascinated me about weather was how mathematical it is on a like practical book level, but for like an applied science, like the people you see on TV, a lot of that's just computer models. The
Right.
computers have done the work for you. So for me, somebody that has a lot of math anxiety, the bookwork stuff really drew me away from wanting to study it on a professional level beyond the military. But I was always fascinated with weather as a kid, with storms and hurricanes, and had all those books that described how a tornado worked and things like that, the big pictures and stuff like that. I was always a big science nerd growing up.
Hmm.
So when they offered me the job in the military, I felt like it was a natural pathway for me to serve my country and do something that was scientific in the same regard. So it was a
Hmm.
lot of fun learning about the weather. I mean, I was in weather school for about 7 months in
Okay.
Mississippi. It's one of the longest trade schools in the Air Force. I think the only other one that's longer is air traffic control down there. And it was fascinating learning everything from how to forecast, like for a local area, to just climatological forecasts using historical data, things like that. But yeah, just kind of touching on some of the stuff you were talking about, the weather controlling.
Mhm.
We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
I know that we do have certain countries around the world. The United States has been pretty hush hush whether or not we've actually done this, but cloud seeding is a thing. We have
Mm.
countries will send planes up to seed clouds to try and inhibit rainfall or to try and break up a hurricane. I know that was a popular thing during the Trump presidency was weather nerds were kind of waiting for him to come out on the podium and say, well, why don't we just drop a nuclear weapon inside of a hurricane and make it go away like real life is a Marvel movie or something
Right.
like that.
Right.
Totally ridiculous stuff like that. But yeah, cloud seeding is real. It's an interesting scientific notion. I've been fascinated by it. I mean, I just don't understand the science behind it too much,
Mhm.
other than what creates the ability for a cloud to gather and dispense more moisture, which obviously would be precipitation. So the geostorm idea, I love the idea of a geostorm
Mhm.
because I'm a big fan of the Matrix franchise. So I think like the blackening of the sky. I think if we keep using AI, I think that that might be coming with the man versus machine, very Matrix-esque
Right.
geostorm that wipes us all out, and we're eating spam and canned corn in a bunker for the next 200 years. You know what I mean? So I
Right.
think it's fascinating, but I don't think that that's scientifically plausible in our current environment.
Mhm.
I do think that the Scottish guy, though, I think he just has a lot of cortisol. Like maybe he's a mutant. He's not.
B.
Yeah, he's just got a lot of stress. He doesn't know how to. He's like the counterpart to Marvel's Storm. Like he's
Mhm.
holding all this energy in. He doesn't know how to handle it, and his way to just control that cortisol and get that out of his system and really soothe himself is to dispense or propagate weather throughout the planet. That would be a fascinating mutant ability.
I think that that is probably likely something to the effect of like he can't solve the problems in his everyday to day life, so he
Mhm.
tries to solve the problems that he are around him.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that that's it's commendable, but at the same time, you kind of wish that he could go out there and just find happiness. But that's it's a hard thing that takes a lot of work. Probably takes even more work than saving the president.
Yeah, saving the president, especially since he's Scottish. I mean, that's quite a feat. Like he has some kind of weird allegiance to the president of the United States as a
Well,
Scottish man. Maybe he moved here as a child. Who knows?
yeah, maybe he's just so good that they're like, "Hey, we're gonna get him from MI6 and bring him over, and because we need to have more international understanding as a country." With the weather, are there any things that you have felt that you've encountered that like are particularly things that frustrated you or things that like really fascinated you?
As a weather for previous a prior weather forecaster, I guess most of my frustration came from people who we disseminated our weather products to that either didn't understand them or just made really weird requests. I used to get the strangest requests from Army helicopter pilots
Hmm.
at one of the bases that I was stationed at. And I think the weirdest request I ever got from one of them is, "Can you find a hole in a thunderstorm for me to fly through?" Which,
What? How would you
yeah,
even do that?
yeah, the radar does a good job of showing us where there's moisture in the air, but I basically had to tell this guy, no, don't do that. And he ended up damaging his helicopter flying out anyways. So that was an interesting experience. I've had forecasters at certain bases want to deny my forecasts. One in particular was up at base up in Washington at Fort Lewis. I put out a forecast for freezing rain, and which is obviously very dangerous. It was the middle of the night. They didn't want to do it because nobody was awake. And I said, look, if I don't put this out, people could potentially die.
Right.
So they ended up closing the base, but somebody didn't get the alert and slid off the road and tragically passed away.
Oh
And then
no.
I ended up getting investigated for it and ended up being the base forecaster not doing his due diligence. But it was a lot of those kinds of annoyances. Weather is just a wonderful thing. I love being out in the weather. I've been outside during a tropical storm, just feeling the force of nature just on your body is just really incredible. When you've got 40 to 50-mile-an-hour winds and rain hitting you, and it feels like just sewing needles hitting you all over your body. And I went inside my dorm on base and could physically see the windows in our dorms bowing in from the pressure from the wind.
Right.
And it was so weird to like place your hand on the window while it's flat. And then when another surge of wind came through, you could just feel it bulge inward. It was such a strange sensation and at the same time very impressive.
Yeah, that sounds like just somewhat surreal, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's just so wild. That's amazing. Matt, this has been so absolutely fascinating. If people wanted to learn more about the weather or more about you, where would you recommend that they go?
Well, I would recommend that anybody wants to learn more about the weather. I use this website every day just to look at the weather, but it's the National Weather Service, weather.gov. There's a ton of training courses you can look at the material for if you want to learn more about cloud types and what they mean and basic outdoor forecasting if you're out camping, lightning safety, hurricane forecasts, all that stuff. You can find it. You can nerd out on that website. Other than that, about me, I don't really have a big social media footprint anymore, but I am on Facebook. If you send me a friend request and you don't look like a total weirdo, I'll accept it. So otherwise, you will end up in friend request purgatory forever. But don't take it personally. I have enough Facebook friends. But if you look interesting and you're into the weather or Arizona comedy, please absolutely hit me up.
Absolutely wonderful. Matt, I can't thank you enough. This has been so fascinating, and I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope the listeners have as well.
Thank you for having me, Matt. Yeah, this is great.
My name is Matt Storrs, and this has been Mattsplaining. Before we go today, I want to thank Ryan Lawson, my dear friend, for making the theme music for Mattsplaining. Ryan can be reached at beatblenderstudios@gmail.com or at Beat Blender Studios on Instagram and TikTok.